Welcome to the sculpting class number 3. Today the presentation will be rather short. First of all, I want to applaud you because most of you have handed in the assignment in the requested format with all the images next to each other, so good job. Then we are on our Mario map right here, and today we learn a few more features of ZBrush and we will finish and wrap up the Pokemon project. So we are right here. And today we will be talking about how to merge these meshes. We already created the block art for our Pokemon, and now we want to merge the shapes that belong together. For example, merge the shapes that belong to the body into one continuous mesh. Then we will talk about subdividing and then how to sculpt in some details. So, for today, your task will be to merge all necessary meshes, extract additional shapes. For example, for this Pokemon, that will be the top part or the one down below here, so that you have all meshes that belong to your concept, all in this 3D scene. Then you will clean up your surfaces if you see any bumps on your surfaces, or if you have very low topology, and then you subdivide it, just making sure that your mesh is overall clean. And that means basically you're finishing up your Pokemon. Then we will talk about polypaint too, so if you want to, this step is optional. You can color your Pokemon, and I'll tell you how to do it. And then, as always, for handing in your assignment, you should pay attention to the proportions and the shapes so that they match the concept. Then homework for this week will be 2 things, not only 1, but 2. So the first step is to upload the screenshot, as always, in the required format. The second step is, this time I want you to hand in the ZTL tool of your Pokemon too. So you go to Save As, ZTL, and you upload this file as well. And in case that you are creating polypaint, please provide a gray version as well. So then you would have like 2 images, one of the polypaint, one without polypaint, and then the ZTL. And I've included the grading criteria from the very first session here as a slide too, so that you can check if your Pokemon is up to your own standards. So what is important for me is that you pay attention to the concept and translate the design well, so that you have the shapes, the volumes and proportions similar to what is in the concept, as close as possible actually. Then clean sculpting, what I said before, no clean, have clean smooth surfaces, no bumps. And then this step might also be important to have enough subdivision to create a smooth surface, because otherwise you have this faceted look, and it's just nicer if you have everything smooth. Then subtool organization, this step will also be important that you complete today's session, that you merge the body parts together. So I don't want to see the legs floating around next to the body or they're simply intersecting, but they're not one continuous mesh, because the body in this case would be just one mesh. So I want you guys to merge it together. This is important. And then completeness. Is your Pokemon complete, and have you submitted everything in the format requested? And that's it for the presentation part. We'll go right into ZBrush. And this time I've, as always, prepared you a ZBrush cheat sheet and one more slide, which is concerning merging meshes. And both of these can be found in the presentations chat. And we will go over this topic together too. So I'll quickly unshare my screen and then we hop into ZBrush. And for this time, I want you to open ZBrush now as well with me, because we will have a section where we talk about these polygroups that I want you to try these features out on your own right after I told you how to do it. Okay. All right. We are back in ZBrush. And just like you, I also had to do my homework. I forgot to save and then had to redo the Pokemon because otherwise I couldn't show you how to merge these things properly. Before we dive into the Pokemon stuff, I want to show you one more cool thing to actually customize the UI in ZBrush. Because while I was doing the sculpt, I realized that there's one button missing in the UI that I definitely would like to have, which is the ZRemesher Keep Groups option. So if we go here to, let's say, Geometry, ZRemesher, and then Keep Groups. But this button is pretty hidden in the menu, and it's annoying to always go back here. So what I did is I added this one here in my menu, and I will show you now how you can do the same. So the first step is you go to Preferences, then Config, and then Enable Customize. This one allows you to drag any button into the UI that you want to. In this case, I already have this one here. I'll quickly kick this one out. And you can kick out buttons by Control, Alt, and then dragging them into the viewport. So you take one button from here and then click Control and Alt and you drag them in the viewport and they will disappear. And the same way, Control and Alt, I can take this button and just drag it in my UI. And the button that I just deleted here is one that I've also added because it's very useful. And the one up here is under Transform, and this one's called Solo, which means, I will show you what it does in a second, but it allows you to isolate one of your subtools and hide everything else with just one button click, which makes it very handy. So Control, Alt, click this button and move it here. And then I can also Control Alt and then move it maybe here, it's better. And then the third button that I added is the AccuCurve. So if I went to Brush and then to Curve and AccuCurve, because I realized I use that one also quite often, so it would make sense for me to also have it in the UI. And I will give you a second just to put this button into your menu too. So you have like 3 minutes to try this one yourself, and the workflow is also on the cheat sheet. And just to finish this one off, it's under Preferences, Enable Customize, we turn this one off, and we store our configuration so that whatever we changed in our UI will be reloaded in the next session too. And we hit OK, and that's it. So you now have 3 minutes to see if you want to add these buttons like the Keep Groups one to your menu. You can try this one out now. Okay, I hope everyone that wanted to customize the UI is finished. Now, let's talk about polygroups. The last time that we used the knife tool, we already learned whenever we use, for example, the knife lasso, that we get a new color on our mesh. And this new color is, like I said last time, a new polygroup. So this is one group and this is one group. And these kind of groups can also be created manually. We don't need to use the knife tool to create a new polygroup. So I will show you now how you can create your own polygroup. And for that, we will take any masking tool that you like. You can use the mask pen or the mask lasso to create a mask of your liking. And now we will press Ctrl and W. This is the shortcut. And you see my mask is gone. And I have created my new polygroup right there. Just so you know, if you turned off this wireframe mode and you hit Ctrl W, you cannot see that something changed. So you need to switch on this polyframe mode so that you can see the different colors. And also, you can't see the colors if you have clicked on this very small button on the button, which shows you the colors. Okay, so it's Control W to assign new polygroup. And then there is, and we can repeat this step as often as we like, Control W, we have a new polygroup. And then if we don't have a mask and we hit Control W, we will flood our entire mesh to have just this one new polygroup. So this can be used to get rid of your polygroups right there. Then let me quickly use this isolate button that we just added to our UI, which means I'm just hiding every other subtool that should normally be visible to show you what my mesh looks like. And for the head mesh, I went on and also created a new polygroup for inside here, and the mouth, like this part, is also a new polygroup. If I hit Control W now to get rid of whatever I created here on the top of the head, you see that my polygroups down here are gone as well. And this is kind of a shame because I still need them. I just want to merge these two together. And this is where Polygroup's greatest strength comes into play, which is we can now hide different groups, and we can tell ZBrush we only want to show the blue polygroup, we only want to show the yellow polygroup. And this way we can make operations without changing the red part in the inner part of the mouth, for example. And the way to hide different polygroups is by using Control and Shift. So Control and Shift was, as far as we learned, for the knife tools, but they can also be used for selection and visibility. So for this, I will use the Select Rectangle tool. So one more time, Control, Shift, you click on this icon, use the Select Rectangle tool. And with this one, Control, Shift, and we click on one of these polygroups, we are isolating this one polygroup, and we could now work on only this polygroup and not be bothered by anything that is down here in the mouth or up here. And if we want to have more than one polygroup in our visibility, like let's say in this case we want to only have the yellow part and the blue part, and this one should stay hidden. So what we will do instead is, what we do now is we Control Shift drag outside, and this will invert our visibility. So right now we see every other polygroup and the yellow one is hidden. So Control Shift and dragging will flip our visibility. Now that we have the yellow part hidden, we can Control Shift and click to add something that should as well be hidden. So right now the blue part should be gone. So Control Shift and clicking on the blue part will make it disappear. Now I am able to only work on the yellow and the red part. However, I want to have the complete opposite. So Control Shift and drag outside. So now I have only these two parts that I want to kind of merge the polygroups together. Now I can use Control and W and it will flood the mesh, but only of the parts that are visible. And to bring the other polygroups back, it's Control, Shift, and clicking. So dragging is inverting, and then clicking while something else is hidden will also make it hidden, and then clicking outside will bring everything back. And let's see if I missed something. There's also one thing to know. If I isolate one polygroup and it's the last or the only polygroup that is visible and I click on it, I have this same invertation effect. So right now you see it kind of did the same as inverting. So I can show it with like one more polygroup active here. So if I have only the blue polygroup because I isolated it and then I click on it, it's also gone. And then I can add more and more polygroups. But yeah, in this case, Control Shift, clicking here, dragging outside, clicking here, dragging outside, and then Control W to flood everything in one color. About the polygroups, there's one more thing, one more way to create polygroups. And one of them is, like I said, masking. But one more thing that is very handy is if I add a new sphere, and I'll exit this one, and I will add this one to my head. Like, don't do this. I will just, I just want to show you something. Okay. Move here. Okay, so right now I have 4 separate meshes, and some of them have polygroups. If I make a copy, the polygroups will be the same. So Control, Shift, and clicking, you see it copied as well the polygroup information. So these are grouped, these are grouped, these are grouped. And if I use this Auto Groups button, if I click here, it will create a new polygroup for each mesh that is separate. So this one is one separate object, this one is one separate object, and so on. And it removed as well what polygroups I had here. But sometimes it's very useful just to have one polygroup for each piece of geometry separately. So this is what this one is for. But right now I don't need this, I just wanted to show you the functionality, so I will go back. Okay. Then I would like you to try out the Control Shift with the Select Rectangle brush and to first create some polygroups. And for this, you don't need to do that on your Pokemon because you might be afraid to mess up something, but you can just append a new sphere and then hide everything else except for the sphere. So you can do that by Shift and clicking on the eye. So while going to the solo mode is one way to hide everything else, this one is too. So usually you need to deselect every one of these, but you can also shift and click on the eye, and this will hide everything. And the one that you have selected will then be shown. So you can do that too. So yeah, the task for right now is to just make a mask, hit Control W to create a new polygroup, then create some more masks to try that out, and then Control Shift with the Select Rectangle tool, click on one, drag, and try out the shortcuts that are on the cheat sheet for the first 2 sections with creating polygroups and the visibility of the polygroups. And you will have 5 minutes for that too, because it is a functionality that we will use in the entire class, and it's very useful. And you probably can't work with the ZBrush if you can't create polygroups, because there are just so many good things that come from polygroups. So this is something I really want you guys to know. So just try it out now, get used to the Control, Shift, and clicking. And I know it can be a lot because Control and Shift are used a lot in this program, but the longer you do it, the easier it gets to separate and becomes muscle memory. So the controls for masking, the shift for smoothing, and Control and Shift for all the crazy stuff for the magic brushes. So yeah, just try out the Control Shift thingies with the polygroups, and if you have questions, let me know. Yes, it is. I secretly sneaked that one in while I was customizing my UI. And this one can be found under Transform and then Solo. And I just put it into my menu because I like it, but you can always find it here in this menu and then isolate your meshes. And yeah, you can put it into your own menu if you want to. And yeah, up there were 2 other buttons. Like one of them was Show and the other one was whatever, but I don't like I never used them, so I just put them here in the viewport so that I have space for these 2 buttons that I use more regularly. Oh, sorry, I just saw the message right now, how to change the material from red to this gray in the interface again. So you are right, when you open up the subtool, sometimes happens, like after restarting ZBrush, that you have this red matte cap. And with these 2 buttons here on the right, you have the option to switch to Madcap Gray or a toy plastic. So you simply click on this one, and then you will have your gray material. Get back. Can you share your screen? Like, I can show you what should happen if you simply hit zero mesh. And like, if you hit zero mesh without the keep groups, it should look like this, because then it will delete all your polygroups. If you have keep groups on and zero mesh, it will create roughly the shape that you have as a new polygroup. Ah, sorry, yeah. Okay, could you zoom in a bit and then go back in your timeline? And then in your timeline, okay. And then further? To the right, I mean, yeah. Uh-huh. So I think what was happening is that you used the zero measure while some parts of your mesh were hidden. Could that be? Let's try that out. So yeah, this would then create this effect. You see, if I hide this mesh, like hide everything else, I use zero mesh, and then it used the zero mesh on my polygroup, but in a very weird way, and then it has this overlapping geometry. So if you go back to the time where you had only just created the polygroup, and then hit zero mesh while everything else is visible, this should be fixed. Yes, and then one thing about, I think that, could you now try the polish by features slider to the right? It's about here. So yeah, this is getting closer to the original heart shape. The thing is, it's because for each interaction, you're kind of choosing how much of a, like, it will already apply it. Like, if I do the polish by feature now, if I release the slider, it means I'm now applying a polish by feature with a strength of 67, because the slider is at the position 67. If I release it, you see it already applied my changes here. And for the next one, I can then choose maybe a lower value. You see, it's like resetting, because for each action you need to choose how strong the effect should be. Okay, so in your case, if you use this slider a lot, and you can also make the effect even stronger by clicking on the circle to make it, like, to clicking on the white dot to make it a circle. This means that the effect is stronger. So if I then use the polish by features, you see that it's smoothing out like too much already. So it made every shape completely like circular. So this one's more than we need it for. But there is one more way how you can smooth out your heart. So if you go back in time to your beginning stages. Go back one more time, please. Or is it? Yeah, this one. Let's work with this one. There is one brush, and you are in the premium position right now because I haven't shown the last group. It just didn't come up. But there's one brush that can help you smooth out these edges more precisely. So what you will do is you go to the lightbox, and then we will go to the brushes tab. And in the brushes tab, we will find one that's called smooth. It's right under this zigzag slice folder. So in this folder, smooth, we will navigate to the one that's in the bottom left called smooth groups. And we can double click this one. It will tell you that this brush will be selected as the sculpting smoothing brush. We say, all right, yes. And now when we hit smooth, like on our keyboard, just the shift button, we see instead of the regular smooth brush, we have now equipped the smooth groups brush. And now if we smooth onto our mesh, we are less smoothing the overall geometry, but we are kind of smoothing the border to become more cleaner. Yes, and this operation is great if we want to, for example, extract the heart. Like you said, like you create a shape, a polygroup, and now you want to, for example, extract it to have it as a separate layer on top. Now your kind of area that you want to extract is way sharper. So what you could do now, like imagine this one would be your heart. I can quickly mimic that it's a heart. So what you can do now, for example, if you want to extract it, Control, Shift, and with the selection tool, click on it. Then we will mask it like this. Control, Shift, and click. So these 3 steps, Control, Shift, and click on it first, then mask everything off. You can also, yep, and then Control, Shift, and click outside to bring everything back. And now we can go to the palette right here, to the subtool palette and find extract. So that's almost the last one. And then we can hit extract. We get a preview of what we would be getting and hit accept afterwards. And then we have our mesh added to our stack of meshes. So right now you would have then a heart that sits on top of your mesh. So yeah, I think right now you might be good point, yes. We can go back to the normal smoothing brush by pressing B, and then the second one, the first one's clay buildup and the second one is smooth brush. We double click it, it will give us the notification whenever you're smoothing, you're now using the normal smoothing brush. We hit OK, and then if I press Shift, you see it's switched to smooth brush again. So for you, were you able to find it? I see that it's not ordered in the same way. Oh yeah, up there. Nice. And now if you press Shift, you should be able to... Yes, it's back to the regular smooth brush. Nice. Okay. Yeah, no worries. Just so that you know, I think you're in solo mode, so yeah, the heart is hidden right now. Okay, so you might ask, what is this even good for? Like, why do we need polygroups? And one big thing is, like I already said, because we can now hide parts of our mesh and only work on certain parts, which is great if we work on the inner part of the mouth. We can also use these polygroups for quick masking, like we just learned right now. So if I want to work on these 2 parts but not on the green one, I can quickly press here, mask off everything, Control Shift to bring everything back, and then I can use, for example, a big move brush and then move these parts somewhere. Maybe I should activate symmetry too. And I can now use them to quickly select certain parts of the mesh where it makes sense to only work on these parts, for example. And one more thing, if we have polygroups, I will subdivide my mesh a couple of times, create one that looks a bit less like this one. Control W. We can now have ZeroMesher create an edge loop that follows exactly this very organic shape, or let's make it maybe less chaotic. And I'll create one here. Control W, and then if we need a loop cut right there, for example, if we want to move anything in this direction, we can go ZeroMesher, keep groups, and then it will create a loop cut right here on the edge. And this is how people kind of cheat when doing retopology, because with these polygroups, you can direct the flow of your ZeroMesher. And if you do it really well and you create lots of polygroups, for example, on a face, you can get a topology that is quite nice for sculpting. And you won't need to do a manual retopology. However, I need to say ZeroMesher is prone to errors, and you might encounter some too, like areas where it's just simply doesn't look too good. So while I say it works fabulously and you can almost use it for retopology, that's not always the case, just so you know. But it's a great tool to get loops flowing in the right direction. And yeah, do you have any questions on the topic of polygroups? I forgot to mention one thing that's... Sorry? How I push them inside. I use the workflow that is also on the cheat sheet. So you control, click, and control, shift, and click on one polygroup, in this case, the big one. Then I will mask off everything. And then control, shift, and click on the background to bring everything back here. And I used the move brush and made it really big to move in these parts. Looks really cool. Okay. Yeah, no, totally, for sure. So whatever is unmasked can be definitely changed with the gizmo too. So you can move it, scale it, you can even rotate it. Okay. And then we should start talking about the topic of our Pokemons and merging the meshes. Before we actually talk about merging them, we need to find out what do we even want to merge. So I'll bring up here our reference. So usually the rule of thumb is everything that is in reality one material should need to be merged into, and it's like touching and intersecting, it should be merged into one continuous mesh. With these Pokemons, we do have some exceptions here and there because they are very stylized, and sometimes we can just keep things separate even though they kind of belong to the same part. And yes, if we talk about this one, we could say everything that has its own material can stay a separate mesh. So first of all, the legs, they should be merged to the body. Then we have the head, that one should be merged to the body too. And then we have the tail that should also be merged to the body. So we have one base mesh for the body. Then we have this brown material that is on top for most of you guys, that sits like on top of the head. For this one, I would say this one should stay separate so that we have clean transitions. And then the big exception here too is usually I would say the jaw is part of the body and it should be merged. However, since we're working with these big stylized shapes, I'd say the jaw can stay separate too. And then this one should also stay separate, and this one should also stay separate. And then for the penguin, it looks like this part should be merged together, like this head with this one, and this one also needs to be merged together. Then the wings should be merged to the body, and then funnily enough, the head, like this white sphere, that one can stay separate because we have this blue scarf part that is covering the transition area anyway, so we cannot see it. And then this part can also stay separate. The beacon should stay a single object, and then for all cases, the eyes should stay a separate object too. Because if you're animating a character, the character needs to move their eyes. And if the eyes are sculpted, it's really hard, if not impossible, to get this proper animation done. So eyes are usually separate. And then here for this guy, even though in reality the feet are kind of merged to the body, since they are in a new material, we can keep these separate too. And then for the Chimchar, we would need to merge this one, need to merge the ears to the head. We could say, okay, here are two different materials, we keep them separate, and these two meshes can be separate too, but the orange one needs to be connected here to the legs, needs to be connected here, and needs to be connected here at the shoulders, and then the flame can be a separate one too. And then the fingers needs to be merged to the hand. All right. After we talked about what to merge, we now want to know, okay, how do we merge it? For the how, we have two options. One of them is Dynamesh, which we used before in the very first lesson. However, Dynamesh kind of creates this very wobbly texture, and also if we're working with polygroups, you can now see it's kind of also messing up the polygroups because of its messy topology, and it's just not super clean. And if we then use zero mesh with groups, we have this even like still wobbly topology, which is also not really usable. But then if we use the polish slider, just like polishing everything or smoothing everything out, this one kind of looks great. Like there's nothing to add here. Then there is a second option called remesh by union, and I will show you just in a bit how to merge things with this method. If we use that one, then we get triangles all the way on the edge of our meshes. And sculpting on triangles is not a good idea because it simply won't work nicely. So we can't use that, but if we zero mesh it with keep groups on, we have this very nice sharp transition and great topology that follows our different meshes. So this one is great. So if we are looking for this style, we definitely should use the remesh by union method. Then again, if we smooth this out, the results of both are kind of the same, so it doesn't really matter. But if we want to have these, and for the Pokemon, I'd say we do want to keep these nice volumes, then we should go with this workflow. So if we want to merge, yeah. Yes, something like this maybe. So what is one of the options that like one of the ways that you can create this thing is by accidentally pressing Shift S. So Shift S creates a screenshot. This is probably why they chose S of your mesh, and it keeps it in your viewport. And this would be if you want to do presentation of your mesh. So you can make a screenshot and then pose your character, like show your character from all three angles and make a like an actual screenshot here. How to get rid of it? You press Ctrl and N, and then all the other copies are gone. Does it work for you? Is everything gone now, or do the two copies still? Can you share your screen quickly? There might be a bug that I encountered yesterday while sculpting too, but let's see first. Okay, press Ctrl and N. Nice. Yes. I think, yeah, now it chilled down. Yeah, nice. Okay. Then, yes, the remesh by union. How do we remesh? And I will demonstrate that with the Pokemon that I sculpted here. So this one needs to be hidden. This one can also be deleted. This one hidden. All right, here we go. So all the subtools that we want to merge together need to be stacked on top of each other in the subtool palette. So what I will do now is I will bring up the head, should be merged to, this is the head one, then it should be merged to the body, and not to the eye. So we will move that on top of the head, and then, or we can hide this one too. And this one's also part of the eyes. We don't need that. Now this one is the jaw, and we said we keep that one separate too. This one's the body, this one's the legs. And you can also change the visible count up here so that you have a longer list of meshes and you don't need to keep scrolling. And this is the shell that we keep separate. This is also part of the shell that we keep separate. This is the tail that we want to merge. These are the leaves that we want to keep separate. Alright, so now I only have these 4, and this one needs to be deleted. I only have these 4 meshes that I'd like to merge. Remember that we need to have these double spheres active, otherwise bad things are happening. So right now, with these visible, I will click on the first one that is on top. I will navigate to merge right here, select merge down and hit OK. Then merge down, hit OK, and you see it's merging them together. Merge down, hit OK, and now we have all the meshes that we need in one subtool, the body. And now the remesh by union is, if you go to the gizmo has this gear icon. In the gear icon menu, we will go to remesh by union. Then we get this, it kind of looks like it already did it, but this is just a preview, and you have this gear icon here that is still visible, and you also have this gray box. This is an indication that this is just a preview. So we need to click this gear icon again to accept whatever it suggested it will be doing. So right now we are back to the normal gizmo. It applied our transformation. And like we learned here, with these triangles we can't really work, so we want to have this topology. And for this we will use the Z-remesh with polygroups. So I make sure that I have keep groups option on, and I will hit Z-remesh. And there we go. We have our body merged and we have a nice even topology. However, if we look at here, for example, the back part, it's really visible. If we don't have symmetry on while we do the Z-remesh, Z-remesher can sometimes be very asymmetrical, even though the shape is very simple. So I recommend turning on symmetry before doing the Z-remesh very highly, because if you would continue working with a topology like this, you would do some sculpting here, and it wouldn't look same on the left and the right side, simply because the underlying topology is different. So just to make sure that you have the same results left and right, we use the Z-remesher with symmetry. So I will go back to the state where I still have my clean shapes. I turn on symmetry, do the Z-remesh again, and then you can see it created a topology that is the same left and right, and this is what we need. And we have our legs merged and everything merged together. And with this state, if we now switch back to this view, especially if we use a lower resolution, we have this faceted look, and we want to get rid of this one too for these smooth even meshes. So what we will do is we subdivide, because Z-remeshed meshes are great for subdivision. So Control D, Control D, Control D. And then you can see we have these very nice transitions here along our mesh. And if we want to, we can even smooth that out stronger. If we stay in this high subdivision level and we smooth, nothing is changing too much. It is doing something, but just very, very slow. So if you want to smooth something, you go to the lower subdivision level, and here if you use the smooth brush, you see our mesh is changing rapidly. So if we want to smooth out parts a tiny bit more, then we can do that in the lower subdivision levels, and then return to the high subdivision levels for render. In this case, I would do it without the extra smoothing, because it looks better without the extra smoothing steps. Also, if you want to make any changes to our mesh, for example, I see a small bump here, I would do that in the lowest subdivision level and change it here. and then my details will update all the way here. If I would make these changes here in the highest subdivision level, my surface starts to get bumpier and bumpier the more of these changes I make, and it's, like I said, hard to smooth them out again. So if you make any changes to your mesh, then do that in the lower subdivision state, right? So okay, so just to show you the process of merging meshes together one more time, append a new block, append a cone, maybe a sphere, delete, okay, and delete sphere, go, and up here, spawn, place. So we need to merge them into one subtool, right here, merge down. And then there's the separates. We go to the gizmo, gear icon, remesh by union. And this is the important step. It's still a preview. We go to the gear icon, accept, and then we do the zero mesh with keep groups option on. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So for the Pokemon, I see that here should be a transition and there should be a transition, but the white sphere and the body don't need to be connected, and also the blue part, everything that's one color, stays like merged together, but like whatever is its own color can stay separate as a rule of thumb. If you think in terms of anatomy, it makes sense, especially like, or for example, to have the feet connected to the legs, like this would make sense, but to have cleaner edges, and since we're working only for presentation purposes, these can stay separate. So you don't need to merge the dark blue part to the light blue part. Yeah. And also here for the monkey, you don't need to merge the head to the orange body in this case. Okay. Then, yeah, we will quickly talk about, with these polygroups, one thing I want to mention is we just, or you tried it out yourself, working on different polygroups by hiding them, and therefore just working on one part of the mesh. So Control Shift clicking, then inverting the selection, for example, masking everything else, and then working on this mesh only by selecting any brush, and you're only affecting this one. This effect is doable definitely by hiding them and then masking it, etc, 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 just what we did. But there is a faster way too, and it's called mask by polygroups. And in your UI, you have this feature, the slider, and you can turn it all the way to 100. By this, you can then, whatever polygroup you clicked first, like the legs, you will only affect this polygroup. So here you see me painting, and if I paint on all the other polygroups, they won't be affected, only the green part. And by this, you can very quickly work on only one polygroup instead of doing the lengthy masking part. So, with that being said, there is one last topic for us to cover, which is polypaint and materials, because we want to color our Pokemon. And here, everything else that is here in my scene can stay separate. So, to get this guy some color, we will go to this color palette up here. We want to pick a green color. Let me show you the reference one more time. Okay, so we want to pick a green color and a light green color. And while you do that, you realize that you will never be able to get this very light shade of green, because if we go all the way to white, which should make our mesh white, we are working on a gray material, which means every color that we select is slightly tinted gray. So to have this very white and color accurate version of our mesh, we need to switch material. We can do that by going to this Madcap Gray, and there should be a material that's called Skin Shade 4. And this material is for me in the top bar. And if you double click this one, your mesh will turn whitish. And this is a better material for coloring, while the gray one is great for sculpting because you see all the surface details. The white one is great for coloring because it's more color accurate. So right now we have the possibility to pick a very light shade of pastel green. See, something like this. Now, as you can see, whenever I click in the color palette, my mesh is changing. So I need to have a way to apply the color to the mesh. And I can do that by going to the Fill Object button. If I click this one right now, nothing is really happening. This is because I need to select what the object should be filled with. I can pick from RGB. If I now fill my object, it will fill the object with color. So if I now select different color, you see the object that I colored in will stay in the same color. This is what we wanted. However, these other two options should also be explained. The M stands for material. So if I now fill my object with the material that I have selected, which is the skin shade material, I fill my object, and this effect will become visible if I now go to the toy material, and everything else is now in this very plastic toy material. However, my mesh itself is still in the skin material. This is because I have flooded my mesh with this skin material. And here with these RGB and mRGB, I can pick if I want to flood only color or material, but I can also pick both at the same time. So here I pick the toy plastic, and I pick, for example, a red color, and I will fill mRGB. Now if I switch back to the skin material and I switch back to, for example, a blue color, you can see that this one is filled both with shiny and red material. And that is the most basic part of it. We can now go ahead and we can color each of them. Like this fill object works for each subtool separately. So now we pick a yellow. Let's see, for this part we need a yellow, a bit more orange. So, and then I will fill it with the skin material that I have selected and the yellow at the same time with mRGB. Fill object. And then imagine I moved my color and I don't have the color anymore, but I want this outer eye part to be in the same yellow as this bottom part. I can use a color picker. So if I click on the color wheel and then drag in the viewport, you see my cursor change to pick. So now I can hover over the yellow material, release, and now I have the yellow in my palette again. I can go to my eye and then fill mRGB. And then what else? For this part, for the shell part, we need a brownish color. This one, fill object. And then for this part, we need something darker. Maybe for the shell, something darker too. Fill object, and then here, fill object. So it's really easy to color in your mesh. And then for the eyes, maybe I actually want to have the toy plastic because the eyes should be shiny and then they should be dark gray. Fill object. All right, so now we have a shiny cute Pokemon. Now, if you want to, right now, we're only using kind of the bucket tool and flood everything in the same color. But of course, you can also paint with a brush. And this one is not found down here, but you need to open the brush palette by pressing B and then paint brush. So it's P for paint, and then A, you see the small purple letter next to it. BPA is the shortcut for the paintbrush. I can click on it, or I can just press BPA on my keyboard, and you see I have paintbrush selected. This brush, it also needs to have this icon enabled, and now I can switch to another color and then just paint on my mesh. See it here. And this mask by polygroups actually works for this paintbrush too. You see, I'm painting only the legs because the legs are a different polygroup than the body, and I still have this slider selected. So this way you can color your different polygroups in an accurate way if you would want to. In this case, they're all the same color, but yeah, you know what I mean. And then we need to also talk about the RGB intensity slider. If I'm painting here, I can also change the intensity and then change it to, this is very low, change it to a softer look to make transitions easier. And then one last thing, you can turn on this RGB button or this M button or mRGB for every other brush too. So we can now go to, for example, the clay buildup brush, turn on this RGB button, and then with the clay buildup, we can also paint color while we are also adding to the surface. Isn't that cool? In this case, not too useful because we don't need it for this project, but for future projects, you know, that you can turn on and paint color at the same time that you're sculpting your material. And I think yeah, sure, I will do that. Yeah, I will upload the presentation and the recording of today. Okay, and then there's one last thing that needs to be talked about, which is I requested you to upload a gray version of your character. And now you spend so much time coloring everything and giving it nice details. There is an easy way to quickly show the gray material that lies underneath without removing your entire poly paint. So the way you do it is by pressing on these brush icons. So if I click here, it will go back to whatever color is selected as if I have never added any or saved any poly and like color data. So I would need to make my cursor go all the way to white, and then I need to go back to the gray material too, because that one is the best for me to judge your forms. And then if I click on this button, you see it is returning, oh, it did not save the material color. So let me go to skin shade, and then here material, fill object, and maybe turn this down, fill object, and then if I go to the gray material, Madcap Gray, and hide my poly color, you see I right now am working with the Madcap Gray material and my entire mesh is in Madcap Gray. But if I go to the brush icon and by shift clicking on it, I can hide and unhide all of these at the same time. I can quickly show the gray material, even though I have poly information and I'm working with the white material. So this is how you can work on your poly paint and then send in a screenshot of your gray material by working with these brushes. And that's it. And I'd like to ask you, do you have any questions about polypaint or the materials? Then I will invite you to join the breakout rooms, and I'll be there in 2 minutes and go with you together over your assignments from last week, and then you could have time to like work on your, like you can already start working on your assignment for this week, and then yes, looking forward to seeing what you did, and see you in the breakout rooms. Bye bye.